Uhuru, brothers and sisters and comrades, this is Omali Shatel. I'm chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. I'm the leader of the Uhuru movement in the International African Revolution. I want to thank you for coming on today, and we're going to talk about some stuff that's pretty serious. And as you know, we are in an ongoing contest with the social media platforms and things like that, or with the ruling class media altogether. So it's really important for everybody who comes on to do whatever you can to expand our reach, to share and do all those other things that you know about to get people to come on to this discussion. So please do that right away. And what we want to talk about, of course, right now is, as we've characterized it, Trump and the death penalty looks like America. And this is a really important discussion for us. In many ways, it's the same discussion we've been having over and over and over again. Looking at the entire setup that has ensnared African people and colonized people all around the world, that allows us to be victims of the worst kind of brutality and nastiness that's imaginable. And in fact, it's hard to imagine in part because it is our oppressors that define what is good and bad, and even puts out or allows information to emerge that helps to define its relationship or the relationship of the oppressor to the rest of us. But let's start now with this article that appeared in Yahoo News. I just want to read a few excerpts of it. And it speaks to this whole question, Trump and the death penalty looks like America. And it's an article written by a woman named Brittany Shepard, who is the national politics reporter for Yahoo News. And it begins, it was dated February 11th, Friday, February 11th, 2020. And it begins, the first federal executions during a president's lame duck period in over a century have turned attention to how President-elect Joe Biden's administration will handle the death penalty. The high-profile case of Brandon Bernard, one of 5 gang members convicted in the murders of 2 youth ministers in 1999, sparked national interest over the past few months as celebrities and politicians railed against his pending execution as part of a larger push to eradicate the death penalty. On Thursday, the Supreme Court denied a petition filed by Bernard's attorney, Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr, and he was put to death later that evening. So this was he would have been killed on Thursday, December 10th. President Trump has supported Attorney General William Barr in pursuing through federal executions, in pushing through federal executions before the end of his term, breaking a 130-year tradition of pausing the practice during presidential transitions. So here we have this brother, Brandon Bernard, who was imprisoned and for offense when he was 18 years old. And people like to point out often, liberals and supporters and opponents of his murder like to point out that he wasn't even the person who was guilty of having killed the people who he was just killed for. And that's something that's worth mentioning. But this was something that really has outreached many, many, many African people who, as a consequence of an outrage about the presidency being held by this serial killer, this nasty cracker, this dirty person, Donald J. Trump. So many people were so outraged, Africans outraged and frightened by Trump, that it drove us in herds to vote for Joe Biden, who in many ways is the subject of this article that I'm talking about. It says the last minute executions under Trump put spotlight on Biden's death penalty views. So here, all these Africans driven into the Democratic Party, into the embrace of Biden, not necessarily all the time, not all the time because they love Biden, but because they despise this notorious serial killer who had built his presidency on a noxious, openly anti-African kind of politic, but not just anti-African. It's against all the colonized people who this administration and a sector of the ruling class would make responsibility for the difficulties being experienced in this social system by white people. And he has mobilized millions of white people to this stance and to this politic, to the extent that even after the end of what's supposed to be the end of the election on November 3rd, Trump pushed, and up until just a day or so ago, and even now has not conceded defeat. So here you have this guy who is a serial killer, who has participated in starving people and does it right now in Venezuela, who with sanctions, who is trying to starve the whole people of Cuba, who's carrying out the U.S. Starvation regime against our people in Zimbabwe, who is continuing the low-intensity warfare directed at the people in Iran, who has never halted the whole war that's being made by the United States government against the people of Yemen, where thousands and thousands of people are killed, who has never repudiated any of this stuff and has presided in full glory over this process. So he's a serial killer. And it was something that most of us knew even if we didn't know the details, even if we never heard of Yemen, even if we don't know anything about Venezuela, the various other places, we know about our communities, and we know about how Trump has heightened fear in our communities. And we know how Trump has rallied white people so that even in the supermarket and at service stations and things like that, there's a greater inclination that you will, there's a greater likelihood that you'll have some kind of confrontation with some white person who now fears that it's okay to express his disdain and hatred for African people, and sometimes even physically. So there is a real obvious kind of opposition to this nasty cracker that I'm talking about. I'm talking about Donald J. Trump. I'm talking about the guy who presides over the U.S. government, the guy who they like to speak of having his finger near the button that could cause the nuclear destruction of the planet Earth, John Trump. And so when we look at this thing about him executing people on his way out the door, opening up the gas chamber, murdering people, so it's not something that surprises us. And in fact, it's under the Trump regime in federal and state prisons throughout this country, the United States in this instance that I'm talking about, we see Africans being held like cattle, like dying, left to die in these institutions, these prisons and jails throughout this country, the largest prison system on the planet Earth, the greatest number of people in prison on Earth. And now they're serving death penalties. So that's what we're looking at. And that's under the Trump regime, but it's not just Trump. And I think it's important for us to understand this. But when you look at Trump and the death penalty, that's why we say it looks like America that we're talking about. So the article that I was just referencing also talks about how, let me read further from it. It says, Bernard's death, that is Brandon Bernard, the young brother that the US government and under the leadership of Donald Trump just broke a 130-year tradition of a president carrying out executions, initiating executions while he's laying duck. So Bernard's death further enraged activists who have grown increasingly frustrated with the Trump administration's use of the death penalty. Yet those activists might find reason for optimism, this article says, in the incoming White House, as both Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris support ending the practice. The current Biden-Harris criminal justice plan calls for the eradication of the death penalty at the federal level and offers incentives to states that follow suit. The plan also suggests that those sentenced to death should serve life sentences without probation or parole, just kept in cages until they die. This is the Biden-Harris plan. And so while they are neither of them, this article says, has made a statement on Bernard's execution, this is what the article does say. Biden's position on the issue, that is to say death penalty, has fluctuated throughout his career. And critics often point to his support while serving as a US Senator of the 1994 crime bill, which greatly expanded the criteria for when the federal death penalty could be imposed. And this article quotes Biden at the time when he participated in this death bill. In fact, he presided over the process with the police of writing this so-called crime bill. And so, and here's what Biden had to say. He said, let me define the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. The liberal wing of the Democratic Party is now for 60 new death penalties, Biden said on the floor of the Senate at the time. The liberal wing of the Democratic Party is for 100,000 cops. The liberal wing of the Democratic Party is for 125,000 new state prison cells. Biden continued to support the death penalty in 2000, but has gradually changed his stance over the years. So the thing that's really interesting here is he has defined the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. So he's saying, Biden is saying this is America. And he's the one who wrote the crime bill. He wrote this federal crime bill that in all likelihood was something that sentenced Bernard to the death penalty, that Trump carried out the verdict that was imposed on him, that was imposed on Bernard by Biden. So I just think it's really interesting to look at that, and that how he bragged about it. He from time to time he has tried to indicate that it really wasn't that serious what he did. But here's an article from the American Civil Liberties Union that talks about how the 1994 crime bill gave the federal stamp of approval for states to pass even more tough on crime laws. By 1994, all states had passed at least one mandatory minimum law. But the 1994 crime bill encouraged even more punitive laws and harsher practices on the ground, including by prosecutors and police, to lock up more people and for longer periods of time. Second, the 1994 law shaped Democratic Party politics for years to come. Under the leadership of Bill Clinton, that's Hillary's husband, that's Slick Willie out of Arkansas, Democrats wanted to wrest control of the crime issue from Republicans. So the two parties began a bidding war to increase penalties for crime, trying to outdo one another. The 1994 crime bill was a key part of the Democratic strategy to show that it can be tougher on crime than Republicans. And this is interesting because it had nothing to do with concerns about us. And even what Biden's stance is today, it's not because of us, it's because of the system itself and how to protect the interests of the sector of the ruling class that he represents. That's what we're looking at. So we've seen, we see what Trump has just done, but we see also the role that was played by the Democratic Party and Biden in particular. And guess what? When he talks about the progressive wing or the liberal wing of the Democratic Party, you know who voted for that crime bill? 1994 crime bill? Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, the darling of Negro liberals, the darling of the so-called the liberals who call themselves socialists and sometimes even revolutionary. Bernie Sanders signed on to that. But let me just say just a little more about this, because I think there's important points that need to be made in passing. And so there's an article that appeared in Vox, and it speaks to this question too. And it says that talks about the 1994 crime bill law. It said it had a lot in it. The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, now known as the 1994 crime law, was the result of years of work by Biden, who oversaw the Senate Judiciary Committee at the time, and other Democrats. It was an attempt to address a big issue in America at the time. Crime, particularly violent crime, had been rising for decades, starting in the 1960s, but continuing on and off through the 1990s, in part due to the crack cocaine epidemic. Now, politically, the legislation was also a chance for Democrats, including the recently elected Bill Clinton, to wrestle the issue of crime away from Republicans. Polling suggested Americans were very concerned about the high crime back then, and especially after George H.W. Bush defeated Michael Dukakis in the 1988 presidential election, in part by painting Dukakis as soft on crime. Democrats were actually worried that Republicans were beating them on the issue. And so Biden reveled in the politics of the 1994 law, bragging after it passed that the liberal wing of the Democratic Party was now for 60 new death penalties, 70 enhanced penalties, 100,000 cops, and 125,000 new state prison cells. And so this is put forth as something that they were contending with each other to be tough on crime. Like Trump says, he's tough on crime. But when did we see what is it that they were responding to? The article that I read earlier said something about how the crime issue became really important, especially in the 1960s. Well, what was the 1960s? The 1960s was Black Power. The 1960s was Black Revolution. The 1960s was Black Panthers. The 1960s were rebellions by Black people throughout this country. And the so-called war on crime meant the same thing then as it means now under Trump. It's a war on the colonized Black population in this country. And they extended this war against to support colonialism by using the legal means at their command, which was the colonial capitalist state apparatus, the police, National Guards, FBI, CIA. This is when you see things begin to happen in our movement like COINTELPRO. All of this stuff was a part of a program that was directed at African people to control us, to keep us dominated, to oppress us, etc. So when we say Trump and the death penalty looks like America, what does America look like? Well, that's part of it, what we've just said. So this crime bill, this crime issue became important with the uprisings of our people. You begin to see in this same period of time that we're talking about, America is fighting a war against the heroic people of Vietnam, who themselves trying to win their freedom from colonialism. Cuba in 1959 had become victorious in the struggle against colonialism. There was a whole tide of struggle by oppressed peoples around the world, which is to say non-white people, around the world to liberate ourselves from the boot or the knee, if you will, on our neck of white power colonialism. And so this is when you see various kinds of things happening, such as what I just mentioned here, the escalation of war against the people of Vietnam, napalm, all those kinds of aggressions to maintain the existence of a status quo, of a social system that requires poverty, oppression, colonialism for its survival and for its own benefit. And the same thing is true of what happened to African people in this country, that it was colonialism. That's what we've been up against, not Trump, not Biden. You see both Biden and Trump, Clinton, all of them. You look at, when we look at Willie Horton in 1988, the case with George Herbert Walker Bush was running for president against Michael Dukakis. And what Bush did was use this picture and this image, this idea, projected it of Horton, who had been let off out of jail for a day, for a period of time to go work, be on furlough from prison. And while out of prison, he allegedly killed and raped a white woman. And so what Bush did, what his campaign did, was put to connect Horton, the Willie Horton strategy, onto Dukakis, to tell white people, if you vote for the caucus, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get Willie Horton. You're going to get depraved black rapists in your community. What's different in that statement and what Trump said when he was coming down the elevator, when he made the announcement that he was running for president, the Mexican rapists and all this stuff, and to do what? To excite, to rise up the colonial hatred, the colonial opposition of white people against the rest of us. It's colonialism that we're dealing with. And it's not even a question of whether this white person likes you or doesn't like you. It doesn't matter if Bill Clinton pretended to play the saxophone or not. The question is colonialism. It doesn't matter that this guy, Barack Hussein Obama, ended up being the face of colonial white power. It was simply white power in a black face. The same system existed then as exists now. So we're upset about what this nasty cracker, Donald Trump, has just done in killing his brother. He's gonna kill some more on the way out. But you know what? Biden is a nasty cracker too. And he is responsible for many more deaths than Trump. In fact, he set up the conditions. He did, Biden, who included 60 more bases for execution for federal crimes than had existed before. He wrote the law. Him and Clinton put it in place. And while they talked about it was supposed to be something that manifested a war against crime, it's not. Crime is understood in this country that crime equates to black. And so the war on crime was a war on black people. The tough on crime is a tough on black people. And there's a rationale for that too, because the whole system rests on the foundation of our oppression and our exploitation. The whole system does. Every morsel of bread that goes into the mouth of a white child has its origin in theft of colonized people somewhere in the world, and in most instances right here in this country. The reason it's possible to go to a supermarket in this country, and regardless of what season it is, to be able to pick up a fruit or a vegetable, it's never out of season, because of what this country is stealing from peoples all around the world who themselves are starving. So the system is hooked up that way. And so what happens is you have a colonized population. You have a population living under the worst kind of duress. And violence is a natural consequence. It's a natural consequence of colonialism. Colonialism means violence, all kinds of violence, violence that most people cannot even understand who do not experience colonialism directly. But Trump understands it. Biden understands it. Kamala Harris understands it. Barack Hussein Obama understands it. It's time you understand it also. The question is not so much who the individual is, who presides over the administration of the colonial enterprise. It's colonialism itself. And you will never get relief from colonialism, even if they give you some kind of reform of a colonial policy. The fact is you still live under colonial domination, and you're still gonna be catching hell for the rest of your life, and generations to come will catch hell unless you do something to stop it. And the only thing you can do to stop it is to join the African People's Socialist Party, join the African Socialist International, join us wherever you're located in the world. Come and be a part of this process, that we take power over our own lives, because that's the only way we will know we will have a life, if we control it ourselves. So let's look at, we talked about looks like America. Trump, the death penalty looks like America. And so we're looking at some race-based life expectancy in this country. I'm not even dealing with much of the rest of the world. When you look at the world, when you look at what America imposes on the world, look at what they've done to Haiti. 300,000 people die in a single earthquake. And colonial institutions say they're going to respond to it, though they're responsible for it in the first place. They're the ones who were responsible for the deforestation and things like that contributed to mudslides. And they're the ones who took troops in there and brought disease from the United Nations and whatever that never existed in Haiti before. They're the ones who have quarantined Haiti since the successful Haitian Revolution. in 1804, the first successful slave rebellion in the world, the first successful workers' revolution in the world happened. Black people did that in Haiti. And Haiti has been despised, and it has become it was the example of what we could do. And so Haiti has paid the price for that ever since. And all of them have participated in starving Haiti and doing everything they could to make sure that Haiti could not be an example of African people having power over our own lives. And so I'm not even talking about stuff like that. I'm not talking about the numbers of people, something like 500,000 people, even before the United States government finally attacked full force Iraq militarily. They had killed 500,000 children and old people primarily through starvation and things like that. That looks like America. The death penalty looks like America. And America, that Trump, America is also like a serial killer, a mass murderer, and what have you. And we're talking about, looking at Trump. He's appears to be somebody who's guilty of sex crimes and other kinds of things like that. And that's not unusual for this social system, not just in terms of the presidency. We've seen that. We know about the Kennedys. And we know about Thomas Jefferson, who raped a 13-year-old African child named Sally Hemings and made babies by her. This is America. The death penalty, it looks like America. So let's look at what we're talking about specific to America. Let's not even include the fact that how they starve our people in Sierra Leone, and resulting in a life expectancy on the average of something like 37 years old. Let's not look at the fact that 1 out of every 8 African women who in childbirth will die in childbirth in Sierra Leone. And the fact that let's look at just look at here in the United States where I'm standing now. And so we're talking about how the Black men have the lowest life expectancy in this country. Is 4 years less than white men. You know, that doesn't make any sense at all in terms of who we are, in terms of physiology. It is absolutely ridiculous that white men will be outliving African men. And as I've said over repeatedly, all you gotta do is watch an Olympics game, and you see where you have the more capable physical specimen. For whatever reasons, that's the case. So it's illogical that left to its own, on the normal, if you can describe such a thing, circumstances, that African people would be dying, African men would be dying 4 years earlier than white men. That's a theft, by the way, of 4 years of life from African people. And that African women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during pregnancy than white women in this country. And then when you look at Baltimore, a baby born in Cheswold can expect to live until age 87, while just 9 miles away in Clifton, Berea, a Black baby can expect to live until 67. So 67, if you're African, and then just 9 miles away, 87. So it's 20-year difference in life. That's 20 years of life stolen from African people. It ain't Trump. It ain't just Biden. It's all of them, but it's a social system as well. And it's a social system that pays the basic white population to support it. So you support it like supporting Trump. 57% of the white people who voted in this country voted for Trump. So it's not, everybody wants to get bent out of shape about how nasty Trump is. That's 57% of the white population voted for that nastiness, because it's defending colonialism. It's defending the benefits that's provided to them by the oppression and exploitation of Africans and other peoples around the world. And in Kansas City, a Black man can expect his life to end 20 years earlier than a white woman living 10 minutes away. In Chicago, a white resident in Streeterville can expect to live until 90, while a Black resident 9 miles south in Inglewood can expect to live until 60. This is the reality we're confronted with. So Trump is a murderer. He's a mass killer. He's a serial killer. He's a sex pervert. He's a nasty cracker. And I don't know if Biden is a sex pervert or not. I know him. You can see already that his sons are both criminals and what have you in terms of how they operate even within the system that benefits them, that favors them, that supports them as privileged white people. Their behavior is criminal. And you see how Biden has participated in creating these laws with Clinton and others throughout the history of this country. Even when you start talking about stuff like the Electoral College and what that means in terms of how unfair it is, because it could have resulted in Trump being elected, even though he didn't get the majority of the popular vote. Well, the reason that came into play in the first place is because it was established in the Constitution, the original Constitution that was only changed with the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, but it didn't change the structures and the practices where the determination of who could vote, who to count the population for purpose of census, for purpose of delegating seats to the House of Representatives and to the Electoral College. It was declared because there were more Black people in the South, that the South would have an advantage if every Black person could vote over the North. And so they made a compromise. They wouldn't give a vote to every African person, credit that person with being able to vote. They wouldn't credit that person as being a person. They said that for the purpose of making these determinations, which way this country is going to go, Africans would be declared worth 3/5 of a vote. So 3/5 of a human being that's where that came from. It didn't say that we were 3/5 of a person, because if we've been 3/5 of a person, we would have at least 3/5 of a vote. We were just 3/5 for the purpose of determining what white people were going to occupy the House of Representatives and what white people were going to occupy the Electoral College that came about to determine whether Trump was going to be president, whether Clinton, Obama, or the rest of them and Biden were going to be president. So the game's been rigged all along, and it's been rigged based on colonialism. And this is what you must understand. You must break free from this notion that we have a problem because of individual white person. You got to break free from this notion that we are suffering from something called racism, which presupposes this central force that white people constitute in the whole world. If they like you, you can succeed. If they don't like you, you can't succeed. And this disguises and undermines the fact that we have a problem because we don't have power. And to get power, you don't fight against racism, which is a concept, something in the heads of white people. You fight against colonialism, which is the absolute control, domination of African people by a foreign hostile entity. And the white people in this country are settlers. They're settler colonialists. And so that says something about what our relationship is with them, and also relationship with the Mexican people, with the other indigenous people who are in these concentration camps that they call Indian reservations. That's the side we have to be on. And that's what we have to fight against, the colonial domination, not only of our people here, Africans all around the world who suffer under the same social system that is reinforced by economic control of economics that come from the resources they steal from Africa, the free labor they've stolen from us, that's concentrated in all the value that you see in this country and other places. This is what it is that we're contending with. And the way out of here is not trying to slime up to get one white person or one white man or one Democratic Party versus Republican Party to support us and be our friends. The way out of here is to organize and to understand that we're involved in a protracted struggle, that we've been involved in this struggle at least since Portugal attacked Africa in 1415 and began the process of capturing and selling Africans again around the world. We have to take back our power. And taking back our power means we have to fight to be self-governing and not reliant all the time on whether a white person is going to get elected that likes us or whether we like that person or not. That's a most irresponsible stance. We have to have the courage to recognize that we have to fight in our own interest, to take our own power, to guarantee that our own children will have a future, because we will guarantee that future with our own hands. So we say, this is what it is that we have to fight for. You should join the African People's Socialist Party. You should join it if you can. And I'm not sure you can, because one thing, we don't take everybody who tries to come into the party. And secondly, you may not be able to because of what you do in the world. You may not be able to do it publicly. So if you can't join it publicly, then join it secretly. But join it, support it. And if you can't join it, and whether you join it or not, then you have to support the African People's Socialist Party, because our objective is to take power. And when we say take power, we don't mean in New Jersey. We're talking about we want the total liberation and unification of Africa, all 12 million square miles of it. We want it all. We want all the resources that we've created throughout the Americas. We want it all back. And so this is what we have to fight for: control of our own life, to be a self-governing people. And also we fight in recognition that there are among us, even in our own communities, even Africans, who work against our interests. Kamala Harris is no friend of ours. Barack Hussein Obama is no friend of ours. They are both Africans, that is true. But the reality is that they are from a class that benefits from the arrangement that colonialism has provided, that sucks our blood, sucks our resources, sucks our dignity, and humiliates us on a daily basis. Our strength, our power is going to be coming from the African working class, the most despised sector of the African population throughout the world, the most slandered sector of the African population throughout the world. That's where the power lies. And the power is concentrated in its own revolutionary working class political party, the African People's Socialist Party. African People's Socialist Party, APSPUhuru.org, APSPUHURU.org. Come on over.